All right, I'll go and announce the meeting and date.
All right. Thank you very much. I'd like to call to order the San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Water Resources Advisory Committee for today, Wednesday, September 5th, 2018. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to start with a show of hands for those voting members to make sure we have a quorum. Seventeen. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, and let's go ahead and start off with introductions. I'm Andy Pease. I'm the chair and on City Council for San Luis Obispo.
Linda Seifert, vice chair.
Sue Love, environmental at large.
George Mendel, farmer.
Steve Simpson, Shannon San Juan.
Tom Mara, RCD.
Jim Gehring, District 4 Rep. Charles Bordeaux, City of Atascadero, City Council.
James Green, Farm Bureau alternate.
Jerry Ray, EPC Water District.
Greg Raywall, 5th District Representative.
That's Laux, 1st District Representative.
Sorry.
Courtney Murguia, San Simeon Community Services District.
And Kathy from Supervisor Arnold.
Thank you. Get everybody on that side. Okay.
Cynthia Replogle, I'm the new director on the Oceano CSD.
Nice.
Tony Lindstrom, Dillon State Water.
Aaron Floyd, City of San Luis Obispo.
Linda Alcantara, County Ag Department.
Ben Schuster, County Planning. Brian Crowley, County Planning.
Megan Martin, County Planning.
Greg Armstrong, Almost CSD.
Ed E.B., almost CSD.
Bill Garfinkel, 2nd District.
John Reed, Camp San Luis Obispo.
Debbie Peterson, City of Garber Beach.
Eric Greening, environmental at large.
Dave Timmons, Environmental at Large.
Linda Chipping, Coastal San Luis RCD.
Brendan Clark, SLO County Public Works.
And Raven Dienzo, SLO County Public Works.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We have a full agenda, so we're going to get cruising here. On the ongoing updates, we're going to actually bump up item E for the county water programs because, do you want me to, minutes, sorry, you're right. The next item on the agenda is approval of the June 6th meeting minutes. Any changes, amendments, comments on those? If not, I'll take a motion.
Move to approval. Second.
And then,
Okay.
thank you. Great. We're going to do a roll call for this first one, so we make sure we have our attendance listed.
Right. There. Dennis Laux.
Here, yes.
Yes. Bill Garfinkel.
Yes.
Linda Seifert.
Yes.
Jim Gehring.
Anthony.
Greg Raywall.
Yes.
Kurt Bollinger or Patrick Williams. Tim Walters.
Here.
Do you approve the minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Sue Left.
Yes.
Eric Greening.
Yes.
David Chipping.
Yes.
Linda Chipping.
Yes.
Tom Mora.
Abstain.
Okay, John Neal or Jamie Hendrickson. Let's see. Okay, John Reed.
Approved.
Okay, thanks. George Kendall.
Yes.
Okay, Anthony Lindstrom.
Abstain.
Steve Sinton.
Yes.
Barbara Harmon. Okay, Charles Bourbeau.
Abstain.
Debbie Peterson.
Yes.
Chris Alacal. Or Kirk Gonzalez. Marcia Guthrie. Okay, Andy Peace.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Craig Armstrong.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's it. Tina Meyer's not here, is she? Okay. All right, yep. All right, motion carries. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, now we'll go on to the ongoing updates. And we're going to start with the various county water programs, as Megan has another meeting. So if you could provide that update, that'd be awesome.
Do you want me to stay here?
You can come up.
Hi, I'm Megan Martin, and I supervise long-range planning and also help to administer and manage the countywide water conservation program and ad offset ordinance for the county. And I really only have one simple update. Otherwise, it's kind of business as usual for us. We're continuing to process Title 19 and Title 8 in both Nipomo and Los Osos, as well as process new development fees for development within Paso. The only update that I have, though, is that we are going to kind of put a pause on processing rebate programs within the Nipomo area. We have gotten down to a savings of less than 75 gallons to being water neutral, and our funding, our budget that's collected from developers' fees within Nipomo. So any new single-family residence pays into the program of about $4,400. That goes into a budget, which we then expend for cash for grass or for plumbing retrofit rebates to homeowners. And we are pretty much all but even in water neutral in Nipomo, minus the 75 gallons. So we're going to put a pause because we've also lost a couple of really key individuals that work on the program. And so we're going to need everything we can to kind of hire new people, begin processing again. And so we're looking to kicking the rebate programs back up in about 6 months as our funds start to increase. And we actually have the manpower to process those rebates. But they will continue in Paso. And other than that, if anybody has any questions, I'm available for questions. Yes?
If you're going to kill the rebate program, is it going to be issuing permits?
We're not killing the rebate program. We're just putting it on pause.
But are you going to hold up on permits then too?
No, absolutely not. We'll
So we're
continue
going
to
to be
collect.
using more water than we save.
Well, that's actually how the program was established by our board. So development stays ahead of the actual water savings. So it allows for development to occur in both the
Do you
Paso
realize
and
that
Nipomo
the
areas.
is in severe water condition?
I do. Yes.
So our concern is you guys keep issuing permits in the county.
Yes. Yes. So that's the way that the board established that ordinance and those programs. So development is able to stay ahead, and our programs work effortlessly to try and catch up to that. But it is difficult. It's a voluntary program, and we do the best with what we have. Fortunately, as I mentioned, we are minus 75 gallons water neutral within the Nipomo Mesa, which has taken us only a year to get to, which we're pretty proud of. But we're going to put a pause on issuing those rebates for the first 6 months, for the next 6 months, and then start back up again with those. Yes?
The rebates are still available in Los Osos?
We don't have any rebate programs available in Los Osos, only in Paso and Nipomo. So there isn't a funding program in Los Osos. To build in Los Osos, you have to pull credit or water credits from elsewhere in order to build. But Paso and Nipomo has kind of a more stay-ahead approach.
When was your program established?
In 2015, the board adopted the water program by resolution. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, is there a place where we can go and see what ag offsets have been approved in the Paso Basin?
If I can give you my email and you can email me and I can get you that information. We have a tracking list that's public information. It's MARTIN, and it's at CO, I wish I brought a card, I'm sorry, co.slo.ca.us. So if you were to spell out that abbreviation, it would be county.sanluisobispo.california.United States.
I almost have that one memorized.
I know.
M. Martin?
Martin.
Martin.
Yeah. There's a Mike in the sheriff's department. He forwards me a lot of emails. Yes.
So how is the $4,400 fee set?
It is established by our fee ordinance. So we have a policy in place to do kind of what we call time and motion studies, and it's the amount of time it takes to process a permit, as well as a $1 per gallon amount that we assume each home in Paso or each home in Nipomo. takes in order to be habitable. So, for example, in Napomo, we assume the average household uses 250 gallons per day at $17.74 per gallon. And in Paso, we assume the average household uses 300 gallons per day, and that's at $16.17. Wow, I just blanked on the change of it, but it's anywhere between $16 and $17 per gallon.
What would the $4,400 fee, is that spent on rebates or staff time, or how is that spent?
Rebates. Majority of it is on rebates. I would say 98% of it is on rebates. We have a 2% allowance for noticing. So, for example, we've noticed twice since 2015 that the programs exist, but we're sending it out to every homeowner in Napomo and every homeowner in Paso. And so we afford for the noticing to be able to get the word out to people so that they can take advantage of the programs.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Greg.
Hey, so you're not noticing the people that live in the city limits, are you?
No.
So
The
the Land
rebates-
Use Authority for Paso and their planned building projects and stuff have nothing to do with this, because over the last 5 years, there's only been 125 new wells added in any building process, and half of those are ag wells, so there really hasn't been that much building going on in the Paso Basin outside the city.
So it's swimming pools, it's single-family residences, it's guest houses, it's secondary units, it's mobile homes, farm support quarters, it's commercial buildings, it's basically anything that creates a new demand on the basin, and it's captured at the building.
That's why all those commercial buildings are moving into the city limits, so they don't have to offset.
Yeah, well, it's captured at the building permit stage. So if it's a non-discretionary permit, they're still obligated to pay into the fee requirements. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions for Megan? Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll see you next month.
All right. All right.
I do have one other issue while we're on 3E.
Sure.
County programs. Actually, a couple of things. One looking backwards and one looking forwards. The Board of Supervisors considered a large package relative to housing, and they approved some pieces relative to farm worker housing and accessory units, expanding the zones and areas and standards for those. That will have water impacts, although they're doing CEQA on the farm worker housing. They are exempting themselves from CEQA on the accessory units piece, and I believe they're doing so in error. There's no categorical or statutory exemption that fits, including the one that they're citing, because it only applies to specific zones. But in any event, they're drawing something up, and we can try to follow as it goes along. Speaking of CEQA, one other thing they did not affirm the 8 growth areas suggested by GIS mapping because it was some weird abstract formula that didn't have much to do with what was going on the ground. But the major concern that was raised during that hearing, which I think may have been what gave them pause, was particularly from the west of Templeton and west of the Atascadero areas, but from some other areas as well, concern over the fractured rock areas are not under SGMA. They are not, basically SGMA is getting all of the bandwidth of groundwater protection, and a lot of major extractors seem to be moving from SGMA-regulated basins into fractured rock areas that don't get that kind of regulation. And I got a sense that they're going to be focusing their attention on how do we develop policies for these vulnerable fractured rock areas that are getting an increasing proportion of the development and extraction. Then looking ahead, probably within a few weeks or at least a month or two, the Board of Supervisors is expecting to revisit the county's CEQA guidelines. And unfortunately, this isn't being run through the Planning Commission or through us or through anyone, so we'll probably only see what's proposed when the agenda for that meeting comes out. So I don't think there'll be a chance for us to act on it as a group, but I think we do need to pay very close attention because there will be a lot of water impacts from some possible changes. And one area that I'm concerned they might go is changing thresholds of significance. Historically, you measure significance based on the current status. And there's been a real fad around the state for moving thresholds of significance to some regulatory ceiling rather than the floor of what's happening now. And that could lead to a lot of use of public resources without mitigation. So it's definitely something to pay attention to as it comes up.
Thank you. Do you know the timing of that at all?
I believe it's
Oh,
the first
Tim.
hearing in November.
November. Yeah, I had heard either October or November, but you've heard November?
Yeah.
Thank you. It may be on election day.
Yeah, it might be, actually.
We'll still all remember to vote.
All right, do we want to, I mean, it does seem like something that we'd want to,
If it's coming in November, that might give us a chance if we have something to bite into, but we probably won't see it until...
We've not seen anything out of Rob Fitzroy's group on that.
so, and it'll go to the supervisors at that, in November, so we'll maybe just have a staff report. Yeah. Do we think it's at a level that we should be ready to have a small committee available to review it on behalf of WRAC, or do we want to kind of see what happens and then follow up if we need to?
I think the only meaningful thing we could do is perhaps agendize for next month a request that we be in the loop before the supervisors act.
That's a good idea. Is that something that we could get a staff update on what's going to be involved there?
There's no way if this schedule holds, there's no way that a subcommittee could run its recommendations through us.
Through RAC
in time
altogether.
for the
Yeah, I
board
mean,
to act, because our
you're right.
meeting is the next day.
You're right. Okay.
So, but asking to weigh in on it and that the schedule accommodate our weighing in on it, we don't have that on our agenda today, but
Right.
perhaps we could put the request, to be able to act on it if we chose at next month's meeting.
Okay.
And get that to them.
Okay, so October 3rd. Tim, did you?
Well, notwithstanding what Eric brought up, which is a great point about the mitigations, the documents that I've seen are more process-oriented than they are
Threshold.
Yeah.
Where have you seen them and are they publicly available?
It's only been discussion with Rob and his group.
Wow.
There isn't anything publicly available.
Thank you.
Brian,
Oh,
I
hey.
can try and hook Tim up or Eric with whoever the planner is working on that project. I don't know if it's Rob directly or if there's some other planner who's working on that. We could do that immediately if someone wants to at least get a schedule of when it's going to be going and make sure that it's.
Yeah, and it'd be great just to, if, before it comes before RAC, just to see if there's anything relevant or not that's going to be on that. If there is going to be something relevant, it would be great to have it come October 3rd, just some kind of an update so we can give feedback. And then if it's not, if it really is only process, then it may not be relevant to RAC in the first place.
Well, process can be important too if it changes opportunities for review. There's a lot of talk of streamlining, and if streamlining means less opportunity to review, especially by a body that meets once a month, then process could be important.
Okay.
Can I
Linda?
just suggest that you ask for a red line so that you can actually see the changes that are relevant to the issues that we deal with or address here? Be helpful, I think.
Yeah, if they have a red line copy, marked up copy, so we know what the changes are.
I would add that, notwithstanding the importance of it, the document is CEQA guidelines that the county uses to
Right, CEQA,
interpret the
right.
applications. It's not related to actual changes to CEQA.
Right, thank you.
The document is from like 1995,
Okay.
the one that the county staff is currently using.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, its intent is implementation, but a lot of significance can happen in how it's implemented. The law itself isn't being changed. The
Right.
state CEQA guidelines are also undergoing revision, but again, not the underlying CEQA law.
And I don't
At
think
this
WRAC
point,
has a lot of
who knows
influence.
what the next legislature will do.
Right. Okay, great. Anything else on that, or keep going here? All right, so we're going to go ahead and circle back through the updates and just pause to see if anybody has any questions or comments. First, rain and reservoir report. Groundwater basin management efforts. Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, here on page 9, it talks about that the DWR released a new draft list of groundwater basins and whether they were low, medium, high, whatever. And it's based on a lot of CAD-GEM. They redid the CAD-GEM numbers and shuffled the deck more or less and changed some descriptions of things. But basically it's based on your reliance on groundwater, how much your pumping is, the amount of population, and then they're guessing on the population from the last census. They're not looking at the actual population growth by building. So I've written a couple letters. One of them's posted on there. The other one they're getting to post because they didn't subtract when Atascadero subbasin. When the DWR made it separate, they didn't take out the right population, nor did they take out the population for Templeton, nor did they take out the basin well, or the wells that Paso uses that are in that subbasin. And we also just finished 3 chapters during the GSA cooperative meetings, and in our 3rd chapter, it shows that Paso is not dependent on groundwater because it has enough Nacimiento water and enough river water permit application to do what it's doing. And also Shandon, the town now has 100 acre-feet of state water, which is shown on there. So the only community that's involved in that that's totally dependent on groundwater is San Miguel. So a lot of these things weren't taken into consideration when they were redoing this information. And I called Mr. Roy Hall, who's in charge of that, so he asked me to update on that. And he said basically it depends on what the local agencies give him. And it's a carrot and a stick deal. If you give them the right information and they change your prioritization to fit what it really is, then you may not get grant money because you don't have the problem. So if you want grant money, you don't tell them anything, and if you do want it, and if you want it to be correct, you do tell them stuff. I don't think that's a good way to operate how this thing works. So you have to go to their website. You can look at the different basins on who wrote comments and where they came from, and you can see the different things on what they're studying and trying to look at.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anything else on basins? Okay, IRWM. Comments or concerns there? Stormwater resource plan.
I want to highlight one thing.
Yeah, thanks.
Brendan Clark, Water Resources Engineer. Just want to highlight for the Stormwater Resources Plan, the public draft is going to be out September 10th. It'll be available on the county website for review. I want to invite all of you to review that and
Do we get an update to
comments
that?
on that. So information can be found in the agenda, but just want to really highlight September 10th that public draft will be out for 30 days.
Be online?
Yes, and the link is in the agenda here.
Thank you. And is that something that would be appropriate to have a summary presentation to WRAC? Is that something that would be relevant, useful?
I don't know.
I think it would
Yeah,
be
maybe a straw poll. Who would be interested in getting a presentation on the stormwater resource plan? for WRAC? Yeah.
Definitely.
All right, so we'll work with Ray and try to get that
Yeah,
scheduled.
and Sarah Crable has been pointing the staff point of contact for that, so she probably Ray and I will get her to do that rotation.
Yeah.
But I know she's been presenting around the county, so that I don't think that would be a big deal.
Yeah, thank you. I'm
course.
I'm probably more curious to see how it's coming together, so
I
thanks.
move that we have a lot of storms to try it out.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank Sarah Crable for coming to Pearl Beach and doing a presentation on the stormwater. It was extremely helpful to me and to city staff when I passed on some of her suggestions. And so I highly recommend that folks take an opportunity to look into what's available as far as grants for the law.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, anything else? All right, and then open reporting on water conservation opportunities, information, catch-all, anything that we missed on ongoing updates? Excellent. Then we will keep going. All right, the next item on our agenda is to consider forming a subcommittee to review the water and wastewater resource chapters of the draft 2016-2018 resource summary report. Right?
Yeah, here will be Ben Schuster and Brian Pedrati. Ben will give a little short presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ben Schuster, County Planning. This is Brian Pedrati, also with County Planning. So, yeah, we're here today just very, very briefly kind of touch on what the RMS is, the Resource Management System, what the RSR is, the Resource Summary Report, and what comes out of that are defined levels of severity for a variety of resources in the county, and touch on what that means. Then also talk very briefly where we are right now in that process, and then moving forward, what that looks like. So a resource management system, kind of a county policy in place. It's designed to basically act as an alert system for a number of different resources. I believe there's 7, so relevant for this committee: water supply, as well as sewage, but we also look at roads and highway interchanges, schools, parks, and air quality. And it's designed to identify upcoming resource deficiencies and alert county leaders, basically, who then have the option to enact a variety of different implementation measures to either conserve that resource or expand the availability of that resource. So the main way that's done is through our biennial resource summary report, and so the last one was done in for fiscal year 2014 through 2016, and so it's been 2 years. So we're looking at the fiscal year 16-18 report, and again, this would identify a level of severity for a variety of resources, and also recommend action items that the board could take to address any resource deficiencies. And to explain very quickly what levels of severity are, so a level of severity 1 is that the resource in question will reach capacity in time for the in time for capacity to expand. A level of severity 2, the rate of the use of a resource must be decreased to avoid exceeding capacity, and then an LOS 3 is that capacity has already been met or exceeded, except for water, in which case we look 15 years out and say you are in a level of severity 3 if your use of water will exceed capacity 15 years out.
Quick question on LOS 2,
Yeah.
rate of resource depletion must be decreased. Does that mean just depleting but at a slower rate? That's what it sounds like grammatically, but I think what we're talking about is reversing the depletion, aren't we? In other words, we want to.
Yes, and it's kind of a general statement about LOS 2 because it is different for each resource. There's normally for LOS 1 and 2 there are for water and wastewater there are years ahead of time associated with it. So
And those have been lengthened recently, haven't they?
Yes, and so it is LOS 2 sort of an in-between time.
Right, it doesn't crank down regulatorily, but it's very important information for planning.
It's important information, and when you did an LOS 1 or 2, you could still see the Board of Supervisors adopting a plan or program to address that now that they have a warning that it's getting closer to completion.
Right, but just to clarify, we don't want to deplete slower, we want to halt the depletion and perhaps reverse it.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Would you elaborate on LOS 3 for water?
So what LOS 3 does for the most part is kicks in when the resource has been met or exceeded. So with water being probably the most important thing in the RSR and in the RMS system, it basically says that we're not going to wait until it's depleted until you're in LOS 3. You have to show that you have enough water up to 15 years. If you don't have it 15 years from now, you get an LOS 3. So it's an extended time period for water because of the amount of time really that it would take to institute a new water supply or really make water conservation measures work.
Moving on. So there's a public outreach portion to this. So part of the reason we're coming before you today, as we have in the past, is to ask you to consider forming a subcommittee to basically look through the water and wastewater sections of the RSR and provide your input. And various other chapters will be going out to other community partners. So various CSDs, county parks, for example, for parks, various school districts for schools.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I want to say something, or maybe you can clear something up.
Yeah.
So the LS 3,
yeah,
and I'm going to use Paso Basin.
Yeah.
You guys are doing this for the unincorporated area because you don't have jurisdiction in the cities. So how does this? I'm going to use the city of Paso. How does your guys' input work when they have other sources and they're not using them and they're depleting a resource? An example is they have 4,600 acre-feet of water that they have a permit for out of the Salinas River. Their urban water management plan said they were going to use that whole amount, and now their new urban water management plan says we're only going to use 3,000, and we're going to keep pumping what we're pumping out of the basin, and we're only going to use 1,000 to 2,000 of our NASI, and their old report said they were going to use all of their NASI. And when does the point start to where they have to understand that they're the ones doing the building, they're the ones using more water, and we're trying to come up with these different things to slow stuff down or to protect things, and they're not participating in that protection?
Well, so the first part of your question is the resource itself is the basin, right? So we are in the RMS and the RSR, we're looking at all users of the basin. So the cities are involved, at least the data we're getting from cities as well as all the CSDs, if they use water from the basin, or whichever basin it is. The second part of your question is, it's a matter of politics. The Board of Supervisors, this is a tool for our board, and they're going to use it to potentially implement plans and programs to affect the resource depletion. We don't have control over the cities, so and the board doesn't. So the board is going to, work with the cities on whatever level that they have, with the committees and everything, on that level. But the resource summary report is for our board to use to address resource depletion.
Are you gonna take any information or use anything that these, like, again, I'll use the Paso Basin, that Montgomery and Associates is working on the GSA stuff? As far as the numbers and what they're compiling on the resource?
Well, we're going to have the RSR is going to be reviewed by Public Works, who are working with the GSAs and all of that. And this is, we're at a sort of a weird crossroads with the RSR, having a water chapter in there, but also with Sigma and all of the basins being reviewed and having their own GSAs. So we're working with Public Works right now to see in the future, how that will impact this. Will this still be here? Will it be a summary of that? Or, we've got multiple things going on at once. So we're in that transition time right now.
As you're dealing with projection, do you have worst case and best case scenarios as far as weather is concerned, as far as water recharge and that sort of thing? Or are you merely extrapolating from history?
Most of the data, correct me if I'm wrong, I think is based on population projection. I'm not sure the weather projections are.
Yeah, they do a range of.
They have a range. Okay.
And I was going to wait on this, but since the LOS stuff has been up, this seems the appropriate time really to ask. It's my understanding that when a community or area is designated an LOS 3, that there are mandatory water conservation programs or management that kicks in or is developed and approved by the Board of Supervisors. But it only happens at the level of severity 3 level and not at the level 2 level of severity?
There are some areas that I think what you're talking about is sort of like automatic triggers. If you come into an LOS 2 or 3, then you have to do something. For the most part, it is a program that where the Board of Supervisors decides. It gives them discretion to choose the plan or program. There are some areas of the coastal plan where things do kind of kick in at an LOS 2 or 3, I think. And that includes there's a policy regarding prioritizing development in the urban area versus the rural area. So, there isn't anything that says necessarily, once you hit an LOS 3, there's a moratorium, or you got to do this, or you got to do that. But really, it guides toward the Board of Supervisors to determine what those programs are.
So I guess going back to just to finish up really quickly where we are in the process. So we are working with an outside consultant who are finalizing data collection in regards to water, and they're very close to releasing the water and wastewater sections of the RSR over to us, I believe in the next few weeks. And so, again, wanted to come to you guys ahead of time to form a subcommittee, and then once we get that those chapters released to us, we can hand those over to you for your input as the water experts. And then, again, once this report goes through public review, it'll eventually go to the Planning Commission for their recommendation, and then up to Board of Supervisors for their review. Probably said this 3 or 4 times at this point, but this is why the reason we came here today was to formally request a subcommittee be formed to review these several chapters.
And when are the comments due?
There's no, I guess part of that was how long would you guys think, a review would take? Would be within the next meeting? So you guys meet monthly, right?
Right, we meet monthly,
So
so,
would like a 1 month period be?
so we probably, just because it's not out yet.
Right.
So we'd probably miss October 3rd and
Okay.
then be able to pick
In
up the November meeting?
Okay.
Right, is that what you were thinking too?
Andy, I can tell, I was on the ad hoc committee last time, and there, it was at least 2 months that we took to
Oh, is that right? Okay.
and work back with county staff on what our comments
And
were.
the process is it comes back to the full RAC for adoption with either as it is or with whatever amendments. So the subcommittee does its work, returns the product to the RAC, and then the RAC as a whole actually sends it on.
Right. Okay, great.
But
So,
is that realistic though? Are you
So-
looking at, say, December 3rd or January to bring to the board?
Bring to the board. I think we had, 8 months ago, had hoped to go to the board in December, but I don't know that, we're adjusting as needed.
Okay.
Well, let's go to the planning commission.
Well, depending on, we're still aiming for late November or December, but again, that might not be realistic anymore. We're adjusting kind of as needed, so I think we're thinking at the latest January, February to Peace Planning Commission, and then, February, March to the board. So,
We went in
which I believe was
March or April last year.
Oh, okay.
We're hoping to try and,
squeeze it all together.
Squinch it up.
because it's, it's a look backward in time, down to fiscal year 2018. So, we're already 6 months,
Right.
we'll be 6 months ahead of January, so we're just want to get it done as timely as possible to make sure we get the right date in.
Does it have a section that links to the success or accuracy of the previous 2 years report?
No.
No. We have, a section in the back, there's recommended actions. So, and those recommended actions may change 2 years later because the board implemented something from the previous 2 years. But there isn't a performance standard type of thing.
okay, great. Well, we can certainly plan on reporting back to RAC with an update in November, and if it's resolved by then, great, but if not, then we may need to extend another month. If that
And when do
seems-
you anticipate the review draft?
Yeah, the
is
key
gonna
is when-
come?
Right, as long as the draft comes out within the next few
I
weeks.
mean, they're talking about the next 2 weeks
Oh,
or so,
okay.
2-3 weeks, so, or earlier hopefully, because we're pushing them to get it out, so.
And I think we would just, when they're available, we would forward it to the subcommittee
Yeah,
immediately when it's available.
Good.
So.
All right, so should we take it in 2 motions to establish a committee and then who's on it, or should we? do it
Yeah,
at
so
once?
do we want a subcommittee?
All right, so first question is, would we like a subcommittee to address this? If so, I'll take a motion to that effect, and then if we do, then we'll go ahead and take nominations for who wants to serve on the subcommittee.
Well, I'll move that the RAC, moves on this. Forms a subcommittee.
Subcommittee, okay.
I'll
Bill.
second
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so moved and seconded to establish a subcommittee. Can I do a vocal?
Yeah, we could do a raise of hands.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, and now we'll take nominations, or who's interested in serving on this, probably 5-ish?
Yeah, and ideally, it would be good to get representation from North and South County, and from, different representative groups, meaning like, not everyone's going to be from the South County or the North. That's what I mean by that. So,
Okay. Experience matters too, so somebody.
I'm happy to be on it.
All right,
I
Tim.
don't want to chair it, though.
I'd be on it too, but not chair.
And also,
Sorry. Thank you. Okay, so Tim is development, right?
Bill?
Bill is
District 2.
District 2, thank you.
And Jim is District 4.
District 4, okay. Environmental at large, want to be? Anybody else? We feel good with those three? Greg?
No, last time I could do it again.
All right. Okay, so it gives us some geographic representation. Anybody else? How are we feeling about that? District 2, 4, development. Greg is what, District 1?
District 1, yeah. Or no.
No,
5.
5, thank you. Wrong direction.
So as soon as you get the information, you'll forward it to us?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Guess we'll close nominations. I can't believe nobody else wants to jump in. And I'm not. No. All right. So our subcommittee consisting of, do we need a motion for that?
No.
No. Okay. Terrific. Well, thank you for that, and then we'll plan to agendize that in November.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. Keep going. Okay, the next item 5, consider adding Estrella El Pomar Creston Water District to the Water Resources Advisory Committee membership. We received a letter to that effect, and any discussion on that item? Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jerry Ray. I am Secretary Treasurer of the EPC Water District. Unfortunately, Dana Merrill could not be here today, so I would like to speak for our water district. We're pleased to have this opportunity to join this group and participate in your activities. I'll just give a little bit of review of the EPC Water District. We're a California water district. We were formed in December of 2017. We're fully formed now. We have a budget. We've collected our first annual dues, so we're fully funded. We're a little different than some other water districts. We are a voluntary water district. The people who are in the water district chose to join this district, volunteered their money, their time, their resources, because we're concerned about water, particularly obviously in the North County and the groundwater basin. We represent rural residents, small landowners, rangeland people, small, medium, and large vineyards. Our constituency represents about 30% of human use of water in Paso Robles groundwater basin. So we're significant. We represent a significant interest. A couple examples of things we've done since we've been formed. The first one is we've hired a well-known, experienced hydrogeologist with extensive experience in our basin. He now participates with the cooperating committee in developing the GSP for our basin. Another thing we're doing, we've recently become members of the IRWM, and we are in the process or have submitted a project for consideration for the regional water quality, the regional water management program. So we're actively involved not only in the GSP, but in other issues in the North County. So it's great to have an opportunity to join this group. We look forward to not only working with this group, working on other sustainability issues for the Paso Robles groundwater basin and participating in the GSP process. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thanks. And can you, the recommendations for the members, if approved, Lee Nesbitt, Hillary Graves?
That's correct.
And those are folks Are they?
I'm Hillary Gray.
Hi, Hillary.
I need two copies.
Just, okay, terrific.
Thank you for your consideration. We look forward to working with you.
Great. Any questions of Jerry? Sorry, Eric?
Are the representatives then members of the board of the district?
Yes, so my name's Hillary Graves. I'm the vice president of the Estrella El Pomar Creston Water District. And just very briefly, our members are committed to contributing to the health and sustainability of all of the water resources in the county, but in particular to the Paso Robles groundwater basin. And we welcome the opportunity to work with this committee to reach that goal.
And you're an elected board, correct?
I am, yes.
Right.
As is Lee?
Yes,
Yeah.
all of us were
We're on
elected.
elected board. Okay, terrific. Any questions or comments? Is that great? Yeah.
Yeah, I got the comment, and I'm gonna be against this. On item number 11, this water district was formed to be part of the GSA, and if they weren't part of the GSA or a GSA partner, then their water district was supposed to dissolve. They make up about 200 people, with 50% of them don't even live in the community, about 40,000 acres out of 600,000 acres. They don't represent the major portion of the community. They represent the people that they want to specifically work for. Mr. Nesbitt works for Windfall Farms, which is a subsidiary that Lemonera that sells water and does farming. They came to Creston and a few years back and tried to make a water deal to have a friendly adjudication and sell water, because they said we could make more money doing that than we could farming. And the people in Creston didn't want that. The people in Creston aren't for this. One of their members that just sold his property is no longer a member now. That owned a ranch there. Now there's a sign up there for water trucks pulling in on the way to make the check out. When you come and fill up your truck to get water, and that water was being sold to the people growing marijuana out in California Valley. So they are exporting water out of the basin. So I'd like to wait to see what's going to happen at LAFCO. Since they're not part of the GSA, there was a vote at the GSA cooperative meeting where all the members of the cooperative meeting didn't make them a partner on that. So I don't know what advantage, when a lot of these people had already been members on WRAC before in different entities. They've been on the Paso Robles Basin Committee, they were on the Blue Ribbon Committee. They've taken over a lot of spots on the Director's Board on the Farm Bureau. So they're already involved in all this stuff. They have the same right to come here like anybody else, give their public comment. And again, they don't represent a large portion of what's going on in the basin up there. Just to give you an example, there's 830 properties, about 1,700 people that are in day 3 of court up in San Jose that's going to be ending here at the end of the month in a quiet title action. A lot larger group that should be represented than a small group that only represents certain people. By using 30% or 40% of the water, you have no guaranteed amount of water. You have a guaranteed amount if you have a permit for river water, which is riparian water. You have a given amount if you're part of the Nacimiento project, but you have no given amount of water out of the basin. There is no exact number that you are guaranteed. You have a beneficial right to the beneficial use on your property. And and SGMA did not change any of the water code nor the water law. So this board will have to do what it's going to do, but I'm against this. I'm against this because of how they went through LAFCO and did it. And they're not part of the GSA, and I don't see any advantage. They're already represented by the 5th District and the 1st District, and they're doing things with the Shandon District, but even the Shandon District at the co-op meeting voted for them not to be a non-voting partner at the co-op meeting. So that's my 2 cents.
Sorry.
I guess I...
You know what, we're going to go in order of the voting members, and then the non-voting members will bring into to comment. Yeah.
So, first of all, I guess I don't understand why we would exclude people who are in the elected business of representing people and are an identified group that would logically be a part of this advisory committee. This is advisory, and we're supposed to be inclusive, not exclusive, and just because we might disagree with the people who are on some group, doesn't seem like very good grounds to be excluding somebody. As far as the GSA is concerned, EPC is a partner with the Shandon-San Juan Water District, and we partnered on hiring a consultant and getting advice, and we just think more heads are better. We've got a really tough job ahead of us to balance the pastoral groundwater basin. We've got, every time I hear a report, it sounds like it's worse than before, and so, I mean, this is a group that's involved in solving a problem, and that's really what we should be doing here. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve or recommend the addition of the EPC to this committee.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and we'll continue discussion. Other voting members? Yeah, go ahead.
I oppose this as well. There are thousands of residents that surround this water district that is not contiguous. It's a scattered mess where they're within 2 miles of each other, but there's a lot of small property owners who are not represented. We all look at these big water guys, but the little person doesn't have any voice or, quite frankly, any recourse, because they formed, they think, their own water district. The problem we have here is that you look at their engineer's report, the Wallace report, and they've got about 41,000 acres in their EPC group. The county acreage, like Greg said, it's over 400,000 acres. Basically, they got about 10% of the pie. But when you look at the Wallace report, they're saying that they would use about 59,000 acre-feet of water a year. Well, the perennial yield of the Paso Basin is right around 100,000 acres, perennial yield. So if they're at 59,000, that doesn't work. These numbers don't work. And, you know, that's why, if they're doing this kind of thing, what other information are we going to have to look at that we're going to have to really go through to see if it's valid or not? This just isn't right because it doesn't represent all of the residents. That's why AB 2453 failed so miserably, is because all the small people got to vote on it. So, you know, I would suggest if you haven't read the Wallace report, read it. You know, you'll also find out that commercial enterprises in the Wallace report are assessed at a residential rate. They do add that, well, it'll be done on a case-by-case basis. Look who's on the board. If it's all big wine interests, do you think they're really going to look at that closely? It's a good question. But these numbers just don't work.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah. We've set a sort of precedent by having voting representation from the Shandon district. So my first question is there any particular difference in structure or how people get to be board members or anything between that district and this district? In other words, are we following a precedent that we've already set if we admit membership from this district?
Well, I
I
think...
can answer that question. They're identical. They're both off-the-shelf water districts according to California Water Code. And their methods of electing their board is the same all the time.
Thank you. Okay.
I have a question for staff. In the report that Mr. Dienza prepared indicated that LAFCO approved the formation of this as a water district in April of 17. So unless I'm missing something, it is a fully formed water district, correct?
Yes.
And then the Board of Supervisors in August of 17 adopted revised bylaws for the WRAC, and it says that each water district is available for membership.
Yes.
So, I mean, to be honest, I'm not as read in as some of you are, but I sense, some consternation or concern, maybe fair or otherwise, about these folks and how they're structured, et cetera. But I go back to the first comments made, and I have to try to understand why, like them or not, why it would be fair or right to exclude them from participation in an advisory body. So I'm not passing any judgment on their merits, but excluding people from an advisory body, to me, that takes a pretty high bar to do that. So I want to understand that better before I could consider voting against the membership.
Thank you. Did you, Linda?
I was probably going to say pretty much the same thing, but if this statement that's in our action item is properly represents what the bylaws say, it seems that they're pretty much here as a matter of right, not really as a matter of discretion. So I guess I'm trying to figure out where the discretionary issue is with regard to adding them to this committee. So I was going to ask staff if they might elaborate further about why there's discretion about their inclusion.
No, well, that's why it even came to the WRAC committee, because really the purpose of bringing it to the WRAC committee is to bring out issues as to why it wouldn't meet the bylaw standards.
And I guess I haven't heard anything. I mean, I've heard there are people that disagree with maybe how they're formed, but it strikes me that they're a California water district.
Yes,
so that seems to be the only.
True. So the only thing that I'm wishing that can be brought up is, so when Greg said that if there's a possibility that their water district status will be rescinded, then that's an issue. But I'm hoping that that'll be addressed here.
But it strikes me that if they're not a California water district, then that would come back before this board, and the likelihood of them continuing as a member would be either discretionary or simply not available. I mean, I'm not sure about that either. So, but it doesn't seem to me that at this particular stage there's any kind of discretion within this group. Is that accurate or not?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Tim, then Greg.
I have to agree. I think the precedent has been set. We had a very extensive discussion with regard to whether or not these districts were going to be included or excluded, and we agreed that they would be included, notwithstanding, the consternation or the disagreements that people have. Of course, I've experienced that myself here, but we've kind of agreed that the districts are going to be allowed in, and I think that more information and more education is beneficial for us as a group. So I think we should stand by what we agreed to. With regard to them participating as a district, I think it would be almost natural that they would stop attending meetings, and we would probably eventually just say, oh, well, they're not formed anymore, and they'd be out. So I think it's important that we be consistent with what we agreed to.
Okay, thank you. Greg?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I never said they weren't a water district. I said there's a possibility that they might not be a water district when LAFCO comes back in because they didn't meet requirements that are written in the rules for them to be a water district. That's why they're trying to partner up and say that they're a GSA with Shannon, because they got denied by the Board of Supervisors to be part of the GSA, and they also got denied to be on the GSA Cooperative Board as a non-voting member. So if they don't meet the requirements, it seems to me we would wait until after the next LAFCO meeting to see what's going to happen at the end of their deal. Part of this other thing is they added themselves to a grant application, which was a fraud, claiming that they spent $250,000 on the basin to get matching funds as part of a GSA when they weren't. Shannon put down they spent $325,000. Heritage Ranch put down they spent $8,000. And so on and so forth. It's all scattered all over, and it's all to get matching grant money through a system of, well, if you spent money to make your district, somehow you spent that on the basin, so you should get that back from the taxpayers. So I have a real problem with how they run their organization, the way that they did the thing. Like I said in the beginning, if this, we change the bylaws, if that's what everybody wants, some more people that are concerned specifically for themselves and not for the basin or the rest of the community, then so be it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other WRAC committee members who would like to speak on this item?
I would. They are a water district, whether we like it or not. have a tremendous amount of experience on this district with all these people as far as ag water law goes. As far as portraying them as the evil empire, I think that's way out of line, in my opinion. So I would also move to have them added as part of the WRAC, just because we've got a lot of issues to deal with up there in Paso, and got some good minds in that group there. So I'd like to see them be a part of it.
Thank you. Any other committee member comments? Open up to members of the public. Anybody else want to comment on this item before the vote?
Just really quick, I'm from Justin Vineyards and Winery. We're a member of the EPC district. And just from a professional, I think it's important to have representation, whether you disagree with the people in the district or not. I think it's important to still have that dialogue and that conversation. And the representatives put forth from the board are absolutely fantastic human beings, and I think that you will enjoy their company, and I think they bring a lot to the discussion. Not only the expertise, where we are deep diving and hiring our own expertise to provide science and data. I think that we need all science and data available to us through this Paso Robles Basin process, and I would absolutely support, even though I'm not a RAC member at this time, I have been in the past, I would embrace the opportunity to work with these people.
Great, thank you. Any other public comments? Sorry, I've got
I think
1, 2, 3.
Someone used the word consistency, and that's really the key issue here. The RAC has accepted the San Juan Shandon Water District. For the purposes of consistency, they should be accepting another California water district. And it's not a subjective decision. It should not be based on whether you like their board or don't like their board or approve of what roads they might be going down. We don't do that about the Cambria Community Services District or any other water district. We don't sit here and say, well, we don't like their manager now, so they shouldn't be on the RAC anymore. It's just entirely a subjective type of reasoning that has no place when you have bylaws that pretty much guide your decision.
What are the issues with I'm confused, sorry, it's a water district or it's not a water district? What are the issues? I mean, are they fixable issues or is it bigger than that?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. We were approved by LAFCO. One of the conditions, so we are a fully formed California water district. We're funded, we had a 218 vote passed. So we complied with all the requirements of the state and the county to be a water district. One of the conditions in LAFCO was that they would revisit our formation after a year to see if we were either a GSA or a GSA partner. And that was one of the conditions of approval, and that hearing is scheduled for November, which LAFCO will hear both sides of that argument to say, did we fulfill the requirements of the original LAFCO approval?
Not a formality, or that's just, it's a formality, right?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by formality. It will be a vote. LAFCO is going to revisit the issue of our district being formed. And they will vote to basically say, yes, the EPC Water District conformed with the requirements that they set, or the EPC has not conformed. So it will be a vote by LAFCO.
Thank you. Yes?
The arguments I've heard against having this group join LAFCO are really arguments against forming the district. The district was formed by LAFCO. That train has left the station. So the real issue now is, are you going to include this district like you are the Shandon district? And it seems to me a no-brainer that they meet the same requirements that Shandon did, and they were formed, and there you go.
Thank you. Any other comments from the general public? So I'm going to close the public part of the hearing, bring it back. Any final comments from committee members before we vote?
Just one clarifying question. So LAFCO, essentially their standard is either be a GSA or a GSA partner, And my understanding from what I think I've heard is that they are not a freestanding GSA, but they are a GSA partner. Is that correct? So they will probably meet the LAFCO standards, and I see no reason to anticipate that they won't. If they don't, they'll stop coming. But I agree with all of those who say it's better to have them at the table than not. Our own bylaws say that, and our whole question about whether to bring in that type of district has been settled, and so we're just following our own direction here. When I heard that the way they were formed was identical to the one we'd already let in, it basically gives us no leeway. We will let you in, and we'll be glad to have you with us.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and take the vote. The motion, it's been moved and seconded to...
So,
sorry.
Steve Sinton was the, and then Sue.
Sorry, thank you. To add Estrella Pomar Creston Water District to the WRAC membership. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Yes. Right. Dennis Laux?
No.
Bill Garfinkel?
Yes.
Linda Seifert?
Yes.
Jim Gehring?
Yeah.
Greg Graywall?
No.
Kurt Bollinger or Patrick Williams? Jason Yeager?
Yes.
Tim Walters?
Yep.
Sue Luft?
Yes.
Eric Greening?
Yes.
David Chipping?
Yes.
Linda Chipping?
Yes.
Michael Tom Mora?
Yes.
Just John Neal or Jamie Hendrickson? Okay, no. John Reed?
Yes.
George Kendall?
Yes.
Anthony Lindstrom?
Yep.
Steve Sinton?
Yes.
Barbara Harmon? Okay. Charles Bourbeau?
Yes.
Debbie Peterson?
Yes.
Kirk Gonzalez?
Yes.
Marcia Guthrie or Sheila Blake? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, wait.
I'm Blake.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Didn't see you back there, sorry. Andy Pease?
Yes.
Bob Gressens or Jerry Gruber? Okay. All right. Craig Armstrong?
Yes.
Okay. And Tina Myers not here. Okay. Let's see. So 20 yes, 2 no, 0 abstain. So the motion carries.
Great. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Does it still have to go through the Board of Supervisors, or
Yes.
It goes through the board?
Yes.
So is the individual,
So
if WRAC approves membership, the recommendation of the
So-
members goes to the board, or
yes,
the whole?
so Lee Nesbitt and Hillary Graves will go before the board to represent, because they're representatives of the board.
Right.
So,
But the board won't be voting on whether or not,
yeah, they're not going to vote whether or not they're part of WRAC.
just approval of
approval
that.
of the
Okay.
committee members. Yes.
perfect, so we don't need action on the
No.
actual individuals. Okay, awesome. Thank you for a thoughtful discussion. I appreciate that. All right. Is everybody here for item 6?
Yes, everyone's here.
Okay, terrific. Moving on to item 6, presentation on hydrologic restoration in a semi-arid environment by George Kendall, member of the representative of the Farm Bureau, and Devin Best, Upper Salinas, Los Tablas, RCD. So, thank you very much.
afternoon. I'm Devin Best. I'm the Executive Director of the Upper Salinas Los Talos Resource Conservation District. You guys have like it too. I'm not letting you out easy. You got me up here in the first place. So I'm going to actually, it's kind of, there's no motion. There's to make here. There's no vote. So there's no pressure. Just it's a presentation on hydrologic restoration. So as I was in the audience kind of listening to about what we do about sustainability and groundwater and basins and everything else, I had put this presentation together probably almost 3 years ago when the GSAs and the Passive Basin Advisory Committee was kind of going forward. And it was actually presented to a different group. But the idea here is still the same. And George asked me if I'd be willing to partner with him to present to you guys kind of what are some solutions to some of our issues. We can certainly talk about a lot of water conservation practices and best management practices and planning, and et cetera. But this is more directed on actual taking action to address some of the big issues that we have. And I'm just going to kind of walk through as quickly as I can because I think really what's the most important part is an example of what we've done so far in George's place, and we can talk more about that. Hopefully we can might have the wrong one. Wrong one. 50-50 chance, right? All right, so kind of going back a little bit, what are some of the issues we're dealing with? And I mean, just in reality, when I first put this presentation together, we were just starting to get into 2015. So I was pulling data from 2010, but population growth in California is supposed to be up into the 40-something plus million people already, where we're at right now, and it's looking like it's going to grow, so there's a limited amount of resources we all have to share and figure out how to manage those. And then also you have climatic conditions, we have greater droughts. What are the 4 seasons in California? They're not winter, spring, fall. They are drought, flood, fire, mudslides, right? Okay. So there's a certain amount of water that's available to us, and it's coming at different times than what we're kind of historically used to. So we're trying to address a lot of those issues as well. And then we just with population growth, urban space expansion. So you're seeing communities that were once kind of isolated now actually growing out into agricultural areas, and agricultural areas going into wildland areas, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a limitation of resources there. So these are all kind of things, but then there's also declining habitats. So a lot of our habitats for fisheries, for wildlife, for our own watersheds, they're already in kind of peril, and we're trying to manage those as well. So there's just kind of the driving forces behind some of the directions that we're trying to deal with. How many people have grown up in this particular area in San Luis Obispo County or Central Coast in general? Just raise your hands. Tom, all right, Steve, a couple others. When we talk about normal rainfall in the Central Coast, it doesn't really apply. I think when they talk about normal, it's pretty much everything north of San Francisco and pretty much everything east of California. This far south, I've got a hydrograph up there. Hopefully I'll hit the right button and I'll go shooting off somewhere else. Is there a light on this? So this is what would be a kind of a normal, typical hydrograph for this area. If you can see well enough, there's January, February, March. So this is as rains come in the wintertime, our streams and reservoirs fill up and they just slowly kind of come down and it goes out to zero. This is out of the Salinas River in Paso Robles. However, that sort of nice little hydrograph is also related to over here, and this is how infrequent our storm events are. I think if you look over here, this is 1997, that's 1977, I think. Or is it 64? 69, yeah. So you can get these major, huge storm events and then nothing for a lot of the rest of the time of the year, right? So even though we show this sort of normalized hydrograph that people go, oh, yeah, we get normal rain in January and February. Yeah, well, every year is totally different. And so you can't bank on normalcy around here. Obviously, a lot of talk about the groundwater basin, what we're looking at in Paso. And that's from an older image, so I don't know if it's been updated recently, but you can get a pretty good sense of where a lot of the discussion today we had was just about the elevations in there. But here's something that's fascinating. August 21st, 2018, there's San Luis Obispo. We are in a moderate drought in our area. Some of us are lucky enough to be, what does it say? I can't even read that. Abnormally dry. Abnormally dry. So we are at that sort of interface between moderately dry or abnormally dry to drought, just depending on what part of the county you're in. That was taken on August 21st. No new rain, so I don't expect it to change anytime since I put this together. But that's the part about being in the coast is what's the other thing that's driving sort of our groundwater issues and water management issues? We don't have a whole lot of infrastructure, right? We have a couple of reservoirs. We don't have major pipeline. We do have the state water line, and we have Nacimiento, but we don't have major reservoirs like Cachuma Lake or Nacimiento River that feeds most of Monterey, et cetera, et cetera. So what we have is land that we use, and we have a lot of it in this area. So moving on. So where to start? Okay, you got a water issue. How do you start dealing with it? Well, planning, science, doing some studies. Here's a couple examples of it. Watershed planning, the RCDs are really good at doing this. We've done a SLO County watershed plan, individual watershed plans, one for Pismo Creek. I'm looking at Linda and Dave. I'm trying to remember which one is it? It's a Roy Candy or something, right?
Middle Creek.
Yeah. So we do watershed planning for individual watersheds. The Upper Salinas did, Los Talos did Upper Salinas. We've also done one for Santa Rosa Creek. We looked at managed aquifer recharge and percolation zone studies. We fund a lot of these things, also as well as hydrologic modeling. The whole idea is basically try and collect as much knowledge and information, scientific information about an area that you're interested in, and pull it all together in some place, and you can start looking at, okay, well, what are the opportunities that are available to us? So, opportunities mean action, right? Here's an example. We have active and we have passive. This is an example of active. You guys, well, I was just going to ask you guys know what this is, but I have it right there. This is what's known as the YOLO bypass. How many people are familiar with the YOLO bypass up in Sacramento, right? So it floods, they take water, they move it down a bypass, preserve some of the downstream people from getting flooded out. It's also used for some recharge. If you look up in Sacramento, they're actually now starting to try and get flood water actually into the rice fields during certain times of year. So that's another way of bypassing or active management. But there's also passive, so creating infrastructure to store hydrologic function. This is an example of it. This is a wetland infiltration pond. We'll kind of highlight a little bit more about that coming up in a few minutes. But this is more of my flavor, if you will. As an RCD, I don't really know much about this and get behind this so much. This is engineers and everybody else that likes to work with concrete and heavy machinery. This is more my nature. I can get grants, I can get funding, I can work with landowners. So incentives, why would people want to even bother doing this in the first place? You're talking to a variety of folks. What's something I can tell them that they might want to actually look at doing this? One of them is it's energy efficient, depending on how they can actually do some of this groundwater recharge programs. They can actually reduce the amount of pumping that they have to do associated with it. Improve land management opportunities, flood risk, drought, etc. And then there's also, this is where I come in as an RCD, as a nonprofit, non-regulatory agency. We have access to a lot of grant funding. Sometimes landowners or even municipalities are not aware of this type of grant funding that's available. So by being able to bring that in, it's an incentive for people to be willing to try and adopt some new practices on their property.
While we're on grant funding, the proposition that was passed in June has some categories that would seem to apply here. When is that funding going to have its criteria nailed down and start cycling?
You're speaking about Prop 68?
Yeah.
It's already unveiling itself as we speak. So just yesterday I was on a 3-hour webinar, which is laborious to listen to, but they're talking already about issuing funds for that.
If there's a link, we'd love to have it on slowwater.org.
Sure. There's multiple agencies, so I wouldn't know if it would be a single link. But
there are several pots within that proposition that could apply.
State Water Resource Control Board, CDFW, CDFA, all have their fingers in some sort of in the pot of money. So I certainly will send that on to Ray and the rest of the folks.
A welcome agenda item here, or maybe at the earworm group, might be one as it unveils sort of a systematic rundown of what pots are available and what they're for.
So Eric, I'm going to ask everybody to hold questions and sidebar conversations just because we're going to run out of time pretty quickly, and I want to make sure that they get through the whole conversation. And then if we have time at the end, we'll ask questions and comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, we'll talk faster too. if that's possible. And then there's also other opportunities for marketing, fish-friendly farming, sustainable irrigation practices, etc. Moving on, benefits for the landowner or whoever else is involved. Long-term solutions for groundwater management and ecosystem recovery, adaptable to climate change. So these can be, we all know we're going to have greater droughts or we're going to have more intense storm events. You can adapt it to meet those things. The YOLO bypass, you build it once, you anticipate this is the amount of water you're going to deal with. We hope that's the way the trajectory goes for the next 50 years, right? Infiltration, wetland, you can build it, you can expand it, you can modify it accordingly. So that's an example of that. In-stream flow for sensitive species. We have endangered or threatened steelhead in this area, trying to find ways to provide water for them during these critical times. It's one of the key pieces. And it's actually one of the ways we got funding to do some work on Santa Rosa, which I'll get to really quickly here. So taking broad spectrum across the entire county, this is how we kind of, as an RCD, sort of focused in our efforts. We picked Santa Rosa Creek mainly because, one, I know that I can get funding for threatened species. Two, I also have a lot of willing landowners. And three, it's got a lot of these issues going on it as well. Plus, we already had a lot of the studies I mentioned. We had a watershed management plan, percolation zone study, which you can see here. So we identify where the high, medium, and low recharge potential areas are within Santa Rosa Creek. So this is Santa Rosa Creek, and this is Green Valley that comes into the side there. And so these areas that are in blue are where there's high potential for groundwater recharge. Moving forward. So then, now I've got an entire watershed. I kind of don't necessarily need to do the entire acreage of that area. I need to kind of focus more on a specific area. What usually is the thing that drives me to focus in on a more specific region or reach within that is usually a landowner participation and willingness. There's obviously a lot of other physical and chemical factors that are in play, but if you have a number of willing landowners and they're all next door to each other and they say, hey, we'd really love to participate in this, that kind of makes you kind of focus on it. So although I list all these other kind of key pieces, right here, landowner participation is probably the main thing. This is the reach that we're working on right now. We've got funds from Wildlife Conservation Board through their Prop 1 Stream Flow Enhancement Program, and this is going to entail a number of landowners that are working on trying to do in-stream flow enhancement. Unfortunately, this didn't quite work out real well, but breakdown of looking at the initial estimates of potential water that could be returned in stream through groundwater recharge. On a low end, you have 0.25 CFS, and that's, I believe, measured at the lowest point of the reach in the month of July. I know CFS, cubic feet per second, 0.25, you're probably thinking, well, what is that relative to? In certain parts of Santa Rosa Creek, it goes completely dry. So 0.25 is pretty significant, actually. And it could be as much as almost 1 full CFS. On the high potential, and this is based on a number of different practices we could actually implement on each individual landowner property, it could be as much as half a CFS, and then almost up to 2 CFS total during the month of July. For fish, this is like the difference between basically no habitat, plenty of habitat, and sufficient water to survive through the summertime. Next big thing we got to do is kind of model. So we want to know not only how much water, but when is that water available. So as we go forward, we're going to be modeling the exact amount of time it takes from a project that might be done, say, over in this area. How long does it take to actually, and this line right here is representing the creek itself. You got to figure out how much time it takes to transverse through the soil profile. So this is kind of the next piece of the work that we'll be doing. And I think I get to give it to George.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so this is an example. This is a sediment basin, recharge basin that we built in the fall of 2015. It was an NRCS project, an EQIP project. It's sited on an ephemeral stream that was diverted. The stream used to be in the middle of the little valley, and about 100 years ago the stream was moved over to the edge of the valley, and that flat is now farmed. I've got lemons and a farm field on the flat. So what we did is excavate below grade, about a 1/4 acre footprint. It's about 6 feet deep. There's a berm, about a 3 foot high compacted berm around it. Capacity is about 1 acre foot. And you can see right there is the little ephemeral stream that flows in. This picture was taken in 2015, the winter. Cost was $15,000. That included permitting. That did not include the plans that were drawn by the NRCS. So what has it done? The first winter, 15-16, we got about 20 inches of rain. That was a big El Nino year. It filled up 4 times with continuing flow while it was full. So we captured about 4 acre feet, about 1.3 million gallons, and that soaked in. Next year was a wet winter. It was full about 2.5 months. I don't really know how much water, but a lot more than 1.3 million gallons. And this past winter, we got about 17 inches of rain. It didn't fill up until March. It was full for maybe a week or so. So this is a little cross-section from a little sediment basin, which is right in that spot, across my farm field, down to the lower terrace. This is Santa Rosa Creek. That's a sediment basin. I've got an observation well, which you'll see in a moment right there. The distance from the little sediment basin to the creek is about 800 feet. And what this cross-section shows is a Franciscan basement, which is basically impermeable, the alluvium, which is the aquifer here, and the end of the dry season water table dashed, and the end of the wet season water table solid line. And the space between those two lines basically represents potential water storage we can capture in the wintertime, is captured in the wintertime for drainage out of the field during the summer and spring. So it's a pretty simple picture, but there's a lot of complexity in the subsurface. It's hard to know that exactly. This is a table, a graph that shows the water level in the observation well in the middle of that farm field, which is just a hole in the ground gravel packed with perforated PVC. We put the little observation well in the fall of 14. We built a basin over here in the fall of 15. It shows that at the end of the drought, I think we only got about 12 or 13 inches of rain that first last dry year. The water table started off about 25 feet. It doesn't come all the way. This is 25 feet, so these are 5-foot increments below ground level. So the water table started out 25 feet below ground, got up to about 17 feet below ground level, declined very slowly that last drought summer to almost 25 feet below ground. And then that El Nino year popped up a couple times, got up to about 8 feet below ground level, and then declined to 22 feet below ground level. Then we had the really wet winter. We got way shallow. I don't really believe some of these really shallow levels, there's perched water and maybe some cross flow. But the overall trend is pretty clear. You fill up the aquifer in the wintertime when it rains, and you drain out very slowly, very gradually during the dry season. The reason for this lengthy period is we didn't get rains this last year until March. We didn't get any recharge on this upper terrace until March. And what this decline curve shows simply is the drainage of water out of my farm field towards Santa Rosa Creek. Either towards the creek, a surface flow, or towards my well. I did a very rough calculation using some assumptions. So I've got a 5-acre farm field. I took some reasonable assumptions for aquifer properties. And if you use 1 foot of decline in the water table per month in the late summer, early fall, there's about 3,000 gallons of water per day that drain out of the field and either go towards a well or towards surface flow. And that's what Devin was talking about. That's not trivial. So, opportunities. These are 2 pictures I took in January of 2017. This is very close to my property. Probably looks like my property did before I planted the orchard. This is a little straight line, blue line stream. In the olden days, you probably meandered out here in the middle of the valley with willows and whatnot. It's maintained as a drainage ditch now. When there's a storm, and this was after a series of little storms, The runoff is captured in this ditch and shoots down the ditch, gets to the county line, straight line stream, county road straight line stream, gets in Santa Rosa Creek and is in the ocean in a matter of hours. In the olden days, it would have had a fair amount of time to meander across the flat. It would have had time, it would have had area, and there's obviously some permeability, and Darcy's law says you're going to get recharged. These sorts of alterations to the landscape, and this was done probably 100 years ago or so. The ditch on my property was built in the 1920s. These sorts of alterations to the landscape really diminish, negatively impact the natural groundwater recharge. If you look at a topo map, different parts of the county, you can see a number of straight line streams like this, or you can see places where streams have been moved over to the edge of little tributaries. All of these things have, negatively impacted what we can recharge. And cities are worse. This slide on the right is a picture taken from Highway 46. That's Green Valley Creek. The purpose of showing this is there's lots of opportunities to do recharge. The obvious one in this picture is flood that field. You can put feet of water on these fields. But you have to be able to make it happen. So I just want to mention there are lots of opportunities. You can flood fields, you can build sediment basins. My little sediment basin is in this sort of a position if it were in this field. You can plant native grass, you can do contour yeoman plowing on hillsides, you can do bigger projects like what's been mentioned for Wewaro Creek and San Juan Creek. Wetland restoration. Just downstream from here is the old Walker Ditch, which was straight line about a mile of Perry Creek back in the 1870s to drain the wetland, to reclaim the ground, which is wonderful to need farm ground. But wouldn't Cambria like about an 80-acre lake? I think they would. Okay, just to wrap up, the problem that I've observed over the last few years is it's real hard to get individual landowners to volunteer to do these things. There's just no real obvious payout. And it's very difficult to get public funding. It might be easier if properties are in the water district or in a basin controlled by SGMA or influenced by SGMA. But that's not the case here. Nevertheless, it's an important thing to do. We do have issues. So I think my hope is that RCDs and other organizations can pursue future projects, maybe with more than one landowner, to chip away at the problem until the environment changes. I don't know how that's going to happen. There is some funding. One of the problems that appears to me with some of the funding is that some of the agencies, organizations that have funding for projects have their own terms and conditions that may or may not be farmer friendly. So, they've got their agendas. Farmers need to make a profit. There's got to be a reasonable way for farmers, fish, and people living downstream all to win. So, with that, I'm sure Devin can answer some questions.
I think that's the next slide is a question. So, if anybody has any questions for myself or George, I think the main thing just is you guys maybe have heard this, but slow and spread it seems it. That's basically this is in practice. We're giving you an example. The stormwater resource plan was sort of thrown out before. We're putting projects in there. We're starting to see the Prop 68 funds coming through. That's going to address a lot of these issues. So if you're interested, contact your local RCD or your county stormwater coordinator or other folks and start working with your neighbors. Because I think George made a great point. He did the project on his place. That was great. But it wasn't until the rest of the neighbors started getting involved that it became a program, not just a project. So it could actually address some of this stuff. So there's my contact info. Feel free to ask me questions if you don't have them now, and then pop up in your head later. Other than that, thank you.
so much. That's awesome. Do want to make sure that we get through these last couple of items on our agenda, but is there any pressing question or comment that anybody wants to respond? I'm personally super excited about that kind of work, so I think it has a lot of potential for our area, and it's going to be a great strategy moving forward. All right, we're going to go on to our next item, a report from the ad hoc subcommittee on additional water. The subcommittee is the additional water conservation measures that can be submitted to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration. Linda Chipping, there was a written report in your agenda packet, and Linda Chipping, our esteemed chair of that subcommittee, will make a couple comments.
Thank you, Andy. Just as a refresher, the committee is
Linda, can you come all the way up here just so we don't have anybody in backs? Thank you.
The committee composition is Andy Pease, Linda Seifert, Stephanie Wall, David Chipping, and myself, and George Kendall. Yay. Our obligations, of course, as a subcommittee are to report back to you, and I realize it's a long report, but I encourage you to look at it and read it. And if you've already done that, what I'd like to have from you is we have looked at a couple of major categories, urban and agriculture. And we've suggested some programs or strategies that might be appropriate. We would like your feedback in terms of what we've laid out, what you would like us to pursue, or what we should just drop off the page. I do want to say that I'm going to jump down to the last part of it where we called it moving forward with the committee. And that is that it's our intention that once we've heard back from you and what your input is, we want to do stakeholder involvement, especially because we don't want to be working in a vacuum, and we need to talk with a variety of organizations and other advisory committees, like the Farm Bureau and the Ag Liaison Board. But our real obligation was to get back to you because we're your subcommittee, and it wasn't appropriate for us to really be out drumming up business until we knew what direction you would like us to take. So after we know what you're comfortable with, then we will go and talk with some of these other groups. We recognize that GSA, just quickly, we recognize that GSAs will be establishing programs, and that's great. We don't anticipate that we will be interjecting into them, but our concerns were for the rest of the county that isn't a medium or a high priority basin, and therefore it doesn't have to conform to any type of requirements by state law. We don't want those low priority basins to become LOS2s or LOS3s. We want them to stay off of that level of severity. So, yes, the GSAs will be setting up programs that will specifically address their problems, but we are looking at more for a broad county-wide program that the Board of Supervisors could consider for us. One of our other focuses, in addition to the urban, residential, commercial, and the agriculture, was that we did look at groundwater recharge. You just saw a terrific presentation on it. Part of the stimulus for that is because we can probably conserve ourselves till we're blue in the face, but with increasing populations, there may come a point at which conservation won't cut it, and the best way to make sure that we have enough water is to increase our groundwater supply. And as you can see, through groundwater recharge, that is an effective water conservation tool to give you more water that you can conserve.
And who knows, maybe down the road you'll reach a point where you're capturing enough water that you may not have to worry so much about really draconian water conservation measures, that they'd be able to pull back a little bit. So keep that in your thoughts. We're not making any recommendations in the report. This isn't the final that's going to be going to the Board of Supervisors. We have a little bit more work to do. But what we want is your input to us. If you would email Ray, if you have some thoughts, if you're not going to share them with us now, to let us know where we're off base or what we should increase or improve with.
I'd just like to point out the committee just didn't sit around and make up a list of things. This is a result of a very extensive web search. We looked at all the counties. Santa Clara County, for example, has an enormous number of agricultural suggestions and things like that. So maybe we should have added a list of websites and things like that from which we derive the data. But this is stuff that was cut and paste and then edited very nicely by Linda.
Can we obtain this through the slowcountywater.org?
Not our initial search. It's all in our
we'll have
computers.
to compile it. We haven't compiled it.
It's in the
we
works.
can. Let me just finish real quick here, Eric. Okay? Hang on. We felt it was important to start this dialogue now. We don't want to reach a point where we're in another drought that's starting to really tax us and that we have to wait in order to implement water conservation measures, that we should be doing those now. I guess that's it. You will see we do talk about this, the RMS, and suggest that there might be potential there for asking the Board of Supervisors when Mr. Pedrotti said that they have recommended actions at the end of their RMS report. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to apply some water conservation measures that they should consider at implementation before they reach that point where they've exhausted their water supply, and to come back up and look at maybe coming in at LOS2 or something like that.
Yeah. In the previous presentation, and thank you so much, I'm going to kind of tie a couple things together. I was very happy to see the map and the work that had gone into it, showing the best recharge areas in the Santa Rosa Creek Basin. I guess my question for you relative to the research you've done on what's going on in other counties is, are there any other counties that seem to have active protocols for that kind of mapping in fractured rock areas?
No.
I haven't seen anything for fractured rock, but there are definitely perk studies that have been done in other counties, and there are managed aquifer recharge programs in several other counties that are quite successful.
Whatever we can learn from them would be wonderful, whether it has to do with larger basins or with fractured rock areas. But I think in this county we're seeing a particular need to implement things in areas that we haven't thought of as basins before.
Thank you. Jason.
Yeah, Linda, I just want to add a couple things as far as ag goes here. You have 1.5 to 2.5 acre feet as kind of a general range there. And I'll let you know, and this is, you're saying it's a typical range, but I'd like to have something a bit more complex in there, because as far as what we're doing in the vineyard part, especially for us at Niner, we're using quite a bit less, and we're using different technologies and everything else. And of course, Ray has asked me to do a presentation, which I will do in November, on all of this stuff. But in general, I'll let you know that we're using between anywhere between 1/3 of an acre foot per acre a year to anywhere maybe about to 3/4 of an acre foot per acre a year at the very most. Now that doesn't include people that use sprinklers for frost control. That's a different issue. So that's going to be a lot more water. So what I might do is, with your permission, is kind of maybe put down a few things here for you and for consideration, and then look it over, and I'd be happy to discuss it further.
We'd gladly have it.
Yeah, that'd be great. So, And maybe, you know, I know that there's quite a few people in the basin that they use sprinklers, but maybe if there was some kind of incentive to replace those sprinklers with wind machines. It's not always possible, but that might be a practical solution to using sprinklers.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I'll do the same. I'll submit some comments. You guys did a great job, and my comments are just some fine detail. One is the same as Jason's, that the water use is probably different from whatever source you had. And Mark Batney spent some studies in the EPC areas, doing one now in the Shannon San Juan. I don't know that he's done it in like the Temple. Yeah, but every place is going to be different. But it'd be nice to kind of get a little, he could probably do some infill here on this particular one. And I think one of the things that we, as a group, might want to do is to try to find some funds in the county to keep going. The Shannon San Juan district is paying him to do the study in our area, but there's a lot of areas, and I think he could just keep, he's got the equipment, so it's pretty cheap now. He just moves the equipment to another area so he can do these water use studies and tell us how much really is getting used, which would be useful. And then in your introduction, there's kind of an emphasis on strategies for reduction. You get into things like recharge. I think up here you ought to talk about it as well. And then I didn't see anything about supplementation, which there's the purple pipe and pass rules, and there's some other things like that. So maybe a little broader introduction. And then the Farm Bureau letter was pretty interesting to me. It got me thinking, and I think we sometimes lose sight of the fact that there are others who have expertise in the water area, and maybe we ought to be doing a little better job of coordinating with them. I wouldn't abrogate our responsibilities in the ag area with water use, but I think we maybe could do a better job of communicating and getting feedback and that sort of thing.
Well, we felt that as a subcommittee, our obligation was to meet with the whole group first. And as I say down in the text later on, it's our absolute intention to meet with stakeholders that have something to say about it, more so than maybe we do, because we're not the experts. But this was, all these basins are going to be looking at water use, not based just on what agriculture uses, but it's for every person that lives within that basin. And so it is appropriate that WRAC looks at it, because we always look at a bigger picture type thing. But in no way were we intending to not talk to other people about it. Linda.
I was just going to say that all these comments are so helpful, but when we started, I think we kind of started to try to simply identify what the issues were, and to really kind of put some kind of just minimal amount of information around those issues for people that really don't have a lot of expertise. But among our group was also the question about, how do we include these other organizations? Do we do that in a way that would educate everybody that was part of the WRAC, or do we simply continue to educate the subcommittee? So in some areas, it seemed to make sense that we invite spokespeople or invite the expertise to come forward to the full group, rather than to allow those of us who have the privilege of serving on the subcommittee to sort of get all the benefit of the expertise. So to some extent, I do think that part of the reason that this interim report is here is so we can get some guidance. Do we want that to come through the larger group? I do think the subcommittee can always be working to create the report and confine and figure out where the expertise might come from to come forward. But it's also to say, how is the best way for us to work on the WRAC's behalf to come up with some great recommendations to send forward?
We're just gonna, we gotta wrap up, so if you want to...
Very fast.
Very
we're going
fast?
to the circular dance here, because we're giving a list of recommendations for everybody in WRAC, but ag is part of the recommendation thing.
Right.
So, it's a circular thing with ag. We would actually like ag to tell the best thing, as Steve suggests here, but then we're feeding it back to ag. So it's a little silly from that point of view, and I do agree that ag can look after itself quite nicely, but the rest of the community has to see what's going on in all sectors, I think.
Right, Linda, anything else?
I just want to mention, I want to prime the pump a bit. At our next meeting in October, we have invited Arnie Anselm, who is the Deputy Director of Water Resources in Ventura County, and he's also the Executive Director for the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Area down in Ventura. They have established a program. They've been in existence 20 years, and they've now finally had to put their pedal to the metal to the pedal?
Pedal to the metal.
Pedal to the metal.
When is it?
It's October 3rd.
Our next RAC meeting.
Next RAC meeting. He's going to do a 20-minute presentation. They have instituted what they call an advanced metering infrastructure and a water market program. Essentially, they have, most of the agriculturalists in the valley have agreed to hook up to water metering, and they are as a requirement to get into the water market program. Through the water market program, they will be able to sell their excess water or whatever they want to do with it. Anyway, it should be a very interesting presentation because it's unique and innovative in the state of California, and it took them 20 years to get there, and hopefully, there's 20 years under Sigma to get to reach certain sustainability issues, but we hope we can do that.
Thank you, Linda.
Sorry.
Appreciate it. All right, and that, just so you know, that clock is just a couple minutes fast. The last item here is discussing future agenda items. I think we have pretty full agendas for the next couple times, but if there's something you're missing, please email Ray.
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce the sign-up thing?
Yeah,
or
no,
do that
just,
next time?
yeah, well, just really quick, like I asked, Jason will be doing a presentation on wine conservation practices, and but I'll send out a solicitation of other people that are interested in doing some kind of presentation as well.
Right, we'd love to, even just 10-minute snippets of what's going on in your water world. That would be awesome to be able to understand each other better. Any comments from the public for items not on the agenda? Nice doing that at the very end. All right, meeting adjourned. See you all next time. Thank you. Sheila, how nice of you to